Math 2, Unit 11, Section 6. Today we're going to be talking more about factoring, but today when we're factoring, there is a leading coefficient, which means that there is a little bit more work to the factoring process, and you actually have to do the long method that we talked about yesterday, but really the long method is not really that bad, okay? So on page 678, they have an example there for you that has kind of been worked through. So when you start here, do you notice this problem here? There is a number in front. Yesterday when we were factoring, there was not a number in front. Anytime you have a number in front, what you end up doing is taking the 6 and multiplying it to the end number, which is 7. And 6 times 7 is what? 42. Good. Okay, now it ends up kind of being, 42 ends up being almost like a side note. And so, but 42 is the number that you're using to find your adding numbers. And so we're trying to find two numbers that multiply to be 42, but add still to be the 23. And so what numbers work? 21 and 2. So they showed you there. And so you're rewriting this problem. Everything stays the same. So notice 6x squared stays 6x squared, but we changed 23x to be 2x and 21x. So you're just rewriting it as the two terms that you're adding. And then you have your last term. And then just like yesterday, we talked about how we group the first two and the last two and factor out your GCF to end up getting your factored terms. So you'll notice here, instead of having a plain X in front of the parentheses, you're gonna end up with numbers in front of some of the parentheses. Okay? So we're gonna move on and do some examples now. So turn to page 679. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do on these problems is you're going to just figure out, well, what is my multiplying term? And in order to find out what your multiplying term is, we multiply 6 times 5, which is 30. Okay, and so 30, and I would write it as either positive or negative 30 so you know that you pay attention to what your multiplication number actually is. And then now we need to figure out, well, what numbers multiply to be 30 and add to be 13. Okay, so again, we can go through and we go 1 and 30, 2 and 15, and there's also 3 and 10. If you notice, 2 and 15 and 3 and 10 both make 13, right? But which one of them actually will not work though? Which one is the better one?
3 and 10.
3 and 10, and why is that? Very good, there's no negatives. And so we need both of them to be positives. I also suggest that you write the numbers and write them as positives or negatives, okay? And so what we're gonna do now, I'm gonna rewrite my original. So we have 6x squared plus 13x plus 5, okay? We keep that the same. And then we end up changing the 13x into 3x and 10x. So I just kind of do my little arrow there to let myself know what's happening. And so I have 6x squared plus 3x plus 10x plus 5. So you always keep everything the same. We just change our middle term to be the two terms that it adds to be. Do we have any questions there? Okay, and then now we're going to split it into our groups and factor out the GCF. So what is the GCF of my first group? 3x, very good. So we write 3x, make a parenthesis. And once you know what your GCF is, we're dividing each of these terms by 3x. And so what is left in the parenthesis? 2x plus 1. Good. If everything cancels out, there is a 1 there. Is anybody confused by what just happened? So if we're confused, 6 divided by 3 reduces to be 2. X squared divided by x reduces to just have an x. Okay, and then here the 3's cancel and the x's cancel, and if everything cancels, there's really a 1 there. Is that better? Okay, the next one, what is my GCF of this group? 5, and we're going to write that as a positive 5, because it's positive, we could factor out a negative. I'm dividing each of these now by 5, and so what am I left with in the parenthesis there? Good, 2x plus 1. These parentheses should always match. If they don't match, you did something wrong and you need to go back and redo it, okay? but they match, so we're good. And remember that that is now my GCF. 2x, these are two terms, and each of them have 2x plus 1. So we're factoring out a 2x plus 1. And then you're left with what's in front for your second parenthesis, 3x plus 5. So that's my answer. If you notice, and if you have music on right now, please turn it off. The front two terms, 2x times 3x, multiplies to make your 6x squared. 1 times 5 multiplies to be 5. So that's another way of kind of double checking that you have the correct numbers there too. So the first two numbers should multiply to be your first, and the last two numbers should multiply to be the last. Okay? And do we all understand how this just becomes one parenthesis? Because that's now my GCF. This part I'm taking out and it's becoming just 1. And then the leftover part goes in the parenthesis. Do we have questions? Okay, so we'll be able to move through these a little bit more quickly now that we kind of understand the process. So still on page 679, number 1. Okay, let's go ahead and do this one together. So the first thing I need to do is what? Multiply. We need to figure out my multiplication number. And so 4 times 3 is 12. Okay, and so this is a -8 here in front. So if we go through and start listing all of our numbers that multiply to be 12, we have 1 and 12, we have 2 and 6, we have 3 and 4, and that's it. So which ones could make a -8 when you're adding and a positive 12 when you're multiplying? Good, but specifically we need those to be what signs? -2 and a -6. And again, before you put everything into your new equation, I suggest you always write like if these are negatives or positives. Okay, so now we're going to rewrite this. We have 4n squared, and we're changing -8n to be what? Perfect, -2n and -6n, and then at the end I have plus 3. Very good. What's next? We group them and take out our GCFs. Okay, and pay attention to the signs that you have. In my first group, what would be my GCF? The first group, we're going to do a positive 2n. Okay, and so we divide each of these by 2n. And when I do that, what am I left with? (2n minus 1), correct? Because 4 divided by 2 reduces to 2, n squared divided by n left over. These all cancel and you're left with 1. Okay, now the second group, I don't want my parenthesis, the first term, to be negative. And so in the second one, I'm going to end up factoring out a negative. Does that make sense? Okay, and so what would be my GCF? But not 3, specifically -3. So I'm going to factor out a -3, which means I'm dividing each of these by -3. And what am I left with? -6 divided by -3 makes a 2n, and 3 divided by -3 makes a -1, right? A positive divided by a negative is a negative. And so then my GCF now is 2n minus 1, right? So we're taking out 2n minus 1, and my other parenthesis is
2n minus 3.
Perfect. Okay, does 2n and 2n multiply to be 4n squared? Does -3 and -1 multiply to be a positive 3? Yes. So I just kind of double checked myself to make sure it multiplies out to be correct. Okay. This next one I was going to have you do it on your own, but you kind of have a large number, so we're going to talk through this one together too, just for time's sake. So, first thing I do is, good, 6 times 20, which is 120. It's a larger number. Sometimes you guys see larger numbers and it scares you. What is the process we should always do? Go through, start with 1. 1 times 120, it makes 120. 2 times what makes 120? 3 times what? 4 times what? 5 times what? 24. 6 times what? Good. 7 doesn't work. 8 times what? 15. So in your calculator, you do like 120 divided by 8 and get 15. So it's 8 times 15. I'm going to stop there. Because as you can see, these two numbers, and as you're going through, like I'm always adding and subtracting. 1 plus 120 is 121. When I subtract it, it's 119. When I add these two, it makes 62. When I subtract them, it makes 58. So I'm trying to, when I add these, it's 43. When I subtract them, it's 37. When I add these, it's 34. When I subtract them, it's 26. When I add these, it's 29. When I subtract them, it's 19. When I add these, it's 26. When I subtract them, it's 14. These two, when I add them, it's 23. So I'm like, oh, this might be it. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you're always like getting your pairs, and each time add them, subtract them in your head to see when you can get your number that you're needing, which is negative 23. So when I rewrite this now, I'm going to write this as 6r squared. And instead of negative 23r, what are we going to do? What do these signs need to be on this? Good. Both of them need to be negative in order for them to multiply and make a positive as well. So we write that as negative 8r and a negative 15r plus 20. Okay, next, what do I do? Group them. Okay, what's the GCF of my first group? 2r, very good. We divide each of these by 2r, and we reduce, and what do we get? Good. What's the GCF of my second group? It's 5, but we're going to take out a negative 5. When you have a negative there in front, you want to take out a negative. So I'm going to take out a negative 5, and so we're going to divide each of these by negative 5. And when I do that, what am I left with? Good. Do those parentheses match? Yes. So that means my answer is going to be what? 3r minus 4? Good. Okay, how can I double check that I did it correct? The front two multiply to be your, and that works. And the last two, negative 5 times negative 4, should multiply to be your last term, which is positive 20. Questions? Okay, we are going to go ahead and move to page 680. And I would like you to try number 3 on your own. Once you get the answer, raise your hand and I will come around and check. Number 3 is the one you should be working on. Bless you. Let's have a hand raise. No, that's not. Okay, so some of you got stuck. Let's see, those that I got answers, got them correct. Okay, first step, step 1. What do we do? Good. And so 6 times negative 5 is a negative 30. Okay. At this point, start listing all your numbers. Okay. So we have 1 and 30, 2 and what? 15, 3 and 10. Does 4 work? Does 5 work? Okay. And then I would repeat. So going through these, which ones could add or subtract and make that answer of 7? Good. 3 and 10. Now, specifically, this is a positive 7. So in order to get a positive 7, which one is negative and which one is positive? 3 is negative, 10 is positive. I'm going to stop there. Okay? Does anybody have questions as to what we've done up to this point? Do you see how if you write these out, it makes your life much easier? And you can use a calculator. You can go 30 divided by 2 and get the answer. You can go 30 divided by 3, 30 divided by 4, 30 divided by 5, and get all your pairs. Okay?
So trying to find the number that gets you the middle number?
So yeah, so you get your product number, your multiplication number. Okay? So remember, and maybe we need to write this, that this is your multiplication, and this one is your adding. So we went through that yesterday, and maybe if you're forgetting, we need to write that out. But when you multiply that together, that makes your multiplication number, and the middle is your adding. Okay? Other questions? So at this point now, what do I do next? Yeah, we rewrite it, but with the adding numbers, right? So I keep 6t to the second, and then I'm going to make that a negative 3t and a positive 10t, and then minus 5. If you flip these around, it's fine. It's going to still factor out to be the same. So if you wrote them differently than me, you'll see how to end up still being the same answer. Okay, so what's my next step now? GCF. So we group them and take out of the GCF of each group. What's my GCF of the first group? 3t. And you divide each of these by 3t. And you're left with 6 divided by 3 is 2. T squared divided by t is t. Minus 3t divided by 3t is 1. Second group, what's my GCF? 5. A positive 5 specifically. And we divide each of these by 5. 10 divided by 5 is 2. And then I have t. And 5 divided by 5 makes a 1. Do these parentheses match? Yes. So we factor them out. 2t minus 1. And we're left with 3t plus 5. Whatever's in front is what we're left with. Got it. We got it? Okay. I think you guys need to try 4 on your own. Okay, if you need my help, raise your hand and I'll come around and help you. Okay, you're doing number 4. If you have the answer, let me know. Perfect. Perfect.
I've seen you guys.
Okay. Do you guys need more time still?
Yes.
Okay, I'll wait another minute. Christian, did you get it?
I'm stuck. Like I have the this number, but are we, like right here, are we supposed to? Well, I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to do.
Okay. So So, you found your numbers. Did you care that I'm writing on here? Did you care that I'm writing on here? Is this fine?
Did I what?
Did you care that I'm writing on here? Okay, so all you're doing is changing this now, because these make negative 5W. So you keep this, keep 4W squared. But instead of negative 5W, we're doing positive 3W, and go down to minus 8W. And then you're keeping the minus 5W. So these two are still right, and this one just changes, because that is the same as that. And then you do your grouping. So this is when you're not writing all the notes, which is probably why you're not understanding the process, because you're not going through. Because like literally you're just grouping it out. You didn't write the line before this. Okay? So you take out your GCF of this group and your GCF of that group. And when you do the GCF, you're going to get to that point right there. And this answer is actually 2x minus 1 times 3. Yeah, I have vacation every 2 weeks. Like that is your trigonometric factor form. The best thing ever. Yeah. So like you miss 6 squared minus 12. Okay. You got it?
Got it.
Okay, the correct answer should be 4W plus 3 and W minus 2. It doesn't have to be in that order of parentheses, but you just need both of those. Okay, how many of you guys got it? Not everybody. Okay, so step 1. What do I do? How do I get my multiplication number when I have a number in front?
4 times 6.
And specifically, that's actually 4 times negative 6, which is negative 24, okay? If you don't remember this, write that is your multiplication number. This number right here, negative 5, is your adding number. Okay? Does that help some of you? 24, my numbers, 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. Out of all those choices, which ones could add or subtract to be negative 5? Good. Okay, now we need to label those with positives or negatives. Shh. 3 is positive and 8 is negative, because when I add those together, it makes a negative 5. That is my adding number. When I multiply them together, it makes my negative 24, which is my multiplying number. So remember, this is like a puzzle. We're finding which to add, and the same ones need to multiply. Okay, do we have questions here? Okay, then all we're doing is changing negative 5W to be 3W and negative 8W. The other parts, this part and this part, stay the same. We just bring them down. So I have 4W squared, and I have a minus 6. Okay? Then we split it up into our GCFs. So here we have our first group. What would be the GCF of my first group? Just a W, right? Do you guys agree? So I can only take out a W. I divide each of these by W. I'm left with 4W plus 3. Second group, what could I take out? And since there's a negative in front here, I want to take out a negative as well. So negative 2 is correct. I divide each of these by negative 2. What's negative 8 divided by negative 2? 4, and then you have W. And negative 6 divided by negative 2 makes a positive 3. Do you see how these parentheses match? So we get 4W plus 3, and then what's left over? Good, W minus 2. Do the front two terms multiply to be my original front term? Yes. Do my back two terms multiply to be my last number here?
Yes.
Yes. This is my answer. This is factored form. Okay. All right, I'd like you to turn, or you're going to stay on the same page. We are going to do one problem here. Page 680, number 5 on interior design. Okay, so if we can stop all the side conversations. The area of a rectangle kitchen is right here. Okay, and that is 8x squared plus 30x plus 7. Okay, what are the possible dimensions of the tile? Use factoring. Okay, do you think you guys can do this? Okay, let's see what you can do. Factor this out, okay?
She likes Jordan because she doesn't eat pork. Oh, it's 56.
Okay, it sounds like most of you got it.
Oh yeah. What? Just started.
Okay, we're gonna go, and it's because we're gonna run out of time. 8 times 7 makes a positive 56, right? What numbers? We have 1 and 56. When I go through my list, what's the next one? 2 and what? 2 and 28. I'm gonna stop there because can those make 30?
Yes.
Yes. And both of them, in order to make this, again, you guys, 30 is my add, and 56 is my multiplying. Okay? So in order for these to add to make a positive 30 and multiply to be positive 56, both of them have to be what? Positives. So we rewrite this. 8x squared plus 2x plus 28x plus what? 7. So 30 just changed into those two. Okay, what is my GCF of the first group? 2x. We divide these by 2x. What am I left with? 4x plus 1. Good. What's my GCF of the second group? 7. And what am I left with? Good. And so that means this becomes what? 4x plus 1, 2x plus 7. Okay, questions? We're going to do 2 more problems here. The thing is that in the last part of the homework today, you need to always check to see if there is a GCF before you start factoring. So GCF, you always check for that first. Do you guys see in this problem here, is there a GCF of the entire problem? Yes. Do you know what it is? It is 4. Okay, so a GCF of the entire problem is 4. I can divide each of these by, and sorry, we're on page 681 now, if you didn't know. We divide each of these by 4, and what am I left with? 2x squared minus 5. Now, I still have a coefficient in front, so we need to factor this further, but the GCF of 4 is part of the answer. So when I end up getting my 2 parentheses, there'll still be a 4 in front, okay? Because you always want to be able to multiply back to what your original problem would be, okay? So in this case, in order to factor this further, what do I do first? Good. And so my multiplying number is negative 10, okay? My adding number is negative 9, okay? So what numbers am I going to use? 1 and 10. Okay, now which one's negative? 10, and the 1 is positive. So I rewrite this, 10x squared plus 1x minus 10x minus 5. Are we okay with that? Why did a parenthesis? I'm not sure. So that is how we got negative 9x. What is my GCF for my first one? X. And I'm left with 2x plus 1. What is my GCF of the second group? And specifically, a -5. And we divide by -5, and I'm left with, and so my factored form is 2x plus 1 and x minus 5, but what do I need to make sure that stays in front? 4. Okay. We're going to go ahead and stop there. Are there any questions, though, first?